Well, you may have noticed, well, if you haven't noticed yet, I'm not going to be preaching today. So we have a student who's going to be preaching, Quentin. And so he's going to take it away. I do want to say, this is just a fun opportunity. The Campus House is all about you guys learning how to grow and how to build your faith and how to share your faith. And so one of the ways that you can do that is through preaching. So I just want to extend the invitation that I feel like, man, like that's something I've wanted to do. Mark and I would be totally willing to help train you, to help work with you, for you to be able to give a sermon. So I just want to extend that invitation to you. And with that being said, can you guys welcome Quentin?
So, hello all. As Caleb said, my name is Quentin. I'm the men's ministry assistant here at the Campus House. I'm incredibly grateful for this opportunity and I'm excited to get started. Now, just to get started, I know a lot of you are tired. It's been a long weekend, all right? I feel the same way, all right? Yesterday was a very long day, but hopefully today won't be too long. So, just a little framework for today. We're going to go over Abraham and Sarah in the first part, and we're going to go over to Hagar and Ishmael in the second part. And so to get us started, a couple weeks ago, Mark talked about Genesis 15. Where in 15, Abraham is searching for an heir to his estate. He's 75 years old, and he's waiting for a kid. He doesn't have one yet, and Sarah is not getting any younger. As women in here know that you have a biological clock in which you can have kids. And after that moment, it's done for, right? End of the line. However, here, Sarah's not getting younger and she's getting impatient, and so is Abraham. And so we see this in Genesis 15, 1 through 5, where it says, "After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. 'Do not be afraid, Abram, I am your shield, your very great reward.' But Abram said, 'Sovereign Lord, what can you give me, since I remain childless? And the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus.' And Abram said, 'You have given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir.' Then the word of the Lord came to him, 'The man will not be your heir, but a son who is your own flesh and blood will be your heir.' He took him outside and said, 'Look up at the sky and count the stars. If indeed you can count them,' then he said to him, 'So shall your offspring be.'" So this verse is interesting. We see that, again, Abraham is very worried if I'm not going to have an heir to inherit my estate. And so God comes down to him and said, "Don't worry, you will have a son in due time." Now, the actual idea of an heir is very important historically. We see that an heir is not just about someone inheriting your estate, but it's about building a legacy. If you do not have a son to inherit your estate, your legacy dies right then and there. Your family line might as well die. And so in verse 6, we see the acceptance of this covenant. Abraham believed the Lord, and he accredited it to him as righteousness. So we see here that Abraham, understanding that, yes, God can provide, God works in our lives, okay, I will accept your covenant. And see that going on. And so just to introduce 16, all right, 16 we see the story of how this plays out, how this covenant is fulfilled. And so I just want to start off by reading verse 16, chapter 16, 1 through 4. We see, now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai his wife took her Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife. He slept with Hagar and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. And so see here, we see that it's been 10 years. Right? God promised Abraham something, and it's been 10 years, he's getting impatient. When is it going to happen? How is it going to happen? That's the question here. Now, it's not something like we waited a week and I don't have a kid yet. No, they're waiting 10 years. And so this is more patient than any of us are right now. I mean, right now, I barely have the patience to wait in line in the dining halls. Let alone, I can imagine waiting there for 10 years just to check out. So, we hear just more patience than any of us could ever be. Now, in verse 2, I want to highlight something that's very interesting here. So, in verse 2, it says, "So she said to Abram, 'The Lord has kept me from having children.'" I want to highlight the word kept. Kept is an interesting word. It gives this negative connotation that someone has interfered in what was supposed to happen. God promised me a kid, but God has now intervened in that promise and is now stopping me from doing so. Almost the idea that they are being punished. And so Abram and Sarah are probably wondering, what did I do wrong? I was promised X, but I'm not receiving X in 10 years, right? Something's not doing, I'm doing something wrong, something's not right. And so this is a common theme in history too, right? We see in the Black Plague that a disease that wiped a third of all Europe. They thought that the Europeans at that time thought that God was punishing them for this. We see this in early church writing all the time, where people thought God was punishing them because the Black Plague was treated like God had a bow and arrow and he was blindfolded. He's going to pull back and fire. You know it's going to hit somebody, but you don't know who. And so it's a very similar thing. I just want to highlight that even though that something has not happened yet, it does not mean God is punishing you. Right? It does not mean you're doing something wrong. It just means it's not going to happen in your time. And so this is something key to highlight before we move on. All right, now because they felt they were being punished, Abraham and Sarah therefore decided to take matters into their own hands. All right, they felt that clearly God is not going to fulfill this covenant, so I must do something about it. And so we see a few different things going on here. One, Abraham just gladly accepts it. All right, this is a man. His wife told him to sleep with another woman. Heck yeah. He's excited. As a man naturally would be, your wife says, have fun with another woman. Really? Yeah. But then also, Sarah and Abraham probably think they're doing something right here. They probably think that, yes, because God is punishing me, I need to do something on my own. And so I think that I'm doing something right by interfering with this and taking matters in my own hands. And so I want to paint a little story for you, all right? Of a little kid named Billy, all right? Let's say Billy is at home and he wants ice cream for dessert after dinner tonight. So he goes to his parents, I want ice cream tonight. I've done all my chores, I did my homework, I'm super excited. All right, his parents, okay, fine. Tonight after dinner, we'll go out for ice cream. We'll go to Dairy Queen. And so, Billy's all day long, he's hyping this up. I'm gonna get ice cream today, I'm gonna get ice cream today, I'm so excited. But dinner comes around, all right? He eats his dinner, he cleans up, he's all ready to go, all right? 10 minutes pass, they haven't left yet. He's like, okay. 30 minutes pass by, nothing happened yet. Are we gonna leave? Are we gonna stay? Like what? Are my parents stopping me from having ice cream? An hour goes by, all right, and they have not left yet. And so Billy's probably thinking, you know, my parents promised me ice cream, but it's been an hour and we still have not left yet. So what's going on? All right, so Billy decides to take matters in his own hands. He goes from the cupboard and grabs himself a cookie. All right, his parents will come down the stairs saying, we're ready to go. Our bellies are settled, let's go to Dairy Queen. All right? And they see the cookie crumbs. What have you done, Billy? We were supposed to go out for ice cream, but you decided to go get a cookie instead. Now, most parents would decide that, hey, my kid decided to ignore my wishes, my promise, and so now not only is he going to get not get ice cream tonight, he's not going to get dessert for the rest of the week. That's the natural response for most parents in the room. Right? There's some parents in the room who think, yeah, I would do that. And probably you students in here is like, yeah, I can see myself doing that.
Wow.
And so, but we see God doing the exact opposite. All right, so despite Abraham doing multiple things wrong. One, he broke the marriage covenant, or between one man and one woman. But two, he broke the covenant set by God early in 16. And so we see this in, and I know AJ, this is not on the slide, so don't worry. We see this in chapter 1, verse 1 and 2. Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah, and as he had said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant, bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. And so we see here that here we see the birth of Isaac. So despite Abraham taking matters in his hand, despite Sarah and Abraham breaking the covenant set, right, God is gracious enough and says, I will still fulfill my covenant with you. What most parents and sisters would punish, God provides grace and forgiveness. And so now I want to shift the focus to Hagar. Hagar is Sarah's slave. Now, a slave at the time is very similar to what we view as a slave. They're property. They're traded and sold, all right? And they have no say over what they follow and what they don't follow. Whatever my master tells me to do, I must do that or I face consequences. And so when Sarah tells Hagar, you're going to sleep with my husband Hagar, and my husband Abraham, she has to accept. She's a slave. She has no choice in the matter. And then we see in verse 5, where it says, Then Sarai said to Abram, You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my slave in your arms, and now that she knows she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me. And so, this is interesting. One, Sarah is shifting the blame. All right? She said, Abraham, this is still your fault. I had nothing to do with this. I'm not the one who slept with Hagar, you did. But then also we see Hagar is getting a little prideful. And naturally so. All right? Hagar has the one thing Sarah has wanted and dreamed for 10 years. And now Hagar has it, her slave. The one that Sarah has mistreated for so long, treated like property, Hagar now has the one thing she wanted. All right? I know when I play board games, right, I can get the same way. All right? I took the one thing that my competitor wanted, all right? And so now I get a little prideful. Look what I got, and you don't. And so Hagar is experiencing the same thing here. But then also, it's interesting what she's doing to Abraham, all right? Sarah shifts the blame to Abraham, like, this is completely your fault. Despite, as we saw earlier, Sarah, told Abraham to do this. She told Abraham to do this, but now she's coming back and saying, you know what? I had nothing to do with this. That's all your fault. And so we see Abraham's response in verse 6. Where it says, Your slave is in your hands. Abram said, Do with her whatever you think best. Then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. And so Abraham, the natural response is, No, Sarah, you told me to do this. This is your fault. I am doing what you told me to do. So don't blame me. And especially it's your slave, do whatever. It's like, this is not my problem. All right, you can do whatever you want. It's your slave. It's your property. And so Sarah then, in return, begins to mistreat Hagar. All right? She's sick and tired of it. Hagar is coming to her with all this pride and resentment, and so Sarah's sick and tired of it. All right? So she mistreats Hagar so much that Hagar decides to flee and run away. Now, later we see that God actually tells Hagar to return. And we see this in verses 9 through 13. Then the angel of the Lord told her, Go back to your mistress and submit to her. The angel added, I will increase your descendants so much that they will be too numerous to count. The angel of the Lord also said to her, you are now pregnant, and you will give birth to a son. You shall name him Ishmael. For the Lord has heard your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. And he will live in hostility towards all his brothers. So she gave this name to the Lord, who spoke to her, You are the God who sees me. For she said, I have now seen the one who sees me. And so here is a little interesting. God is providing reassurance. All right? He tells her that despite all the wrongdoings that Sarah has done on you, despite all the torment in your life, go back to your mistress, go back to your master, for I have a plan for you. And we see the reassurance here too, where God says, I will make your descendants too numerous to count. This kind of goes back to the idea of having an heir, all right? Leaving a legacy, all right? Hagar's legacy will extend so much that it will be too numerous to count. Now, that must be super impactful for her, super memorable. God has told me, don't worry, I will take care of your descendants. I will take care of your son. And so, yeah, we see the reassurance. And now in verse 13, we see a response from Hagar in faith. Not worry, but faith. As she says, You are the God who sees me. I have now seen the one who sees me. This is faith. She responds in faith, not worry. And so, let's touch on what does it mean for God to see you? God, in this instance, sees Hagar's problems, sees the misery going on, sees the pleading. And God responds, provides reassurance, provides her a plan, telling her, don't worry anymore, I have you covered. Now, what is the significance of it? So here we see a difference, a dichotomy between sympathy and empathy. All right? Sympathy is a lack of being able to actually resonate with what's going on. Sympathy is if your grandmother dies and I go up to you and say, I'm sorry for your loss. That's sympathy. Empathy would be, the other hand, is like, you know what, I've gone through something similar. Let me help you through this. That's empathy. And so we see empathy coming from God. We see that instead of, oh, I'm sorry, and then walk away, God says, yeah, I see your problems. I know your problems. I understand your problems. And yet, despite all these problems, I will provide. Whereas if God provided in sympathy, Hagar would probably not have responded in such faith as she did. I was like, cool, I'm glad you're sorry for me, but that doesn't change anything, right? That doesn't fix my problems. So, go away, I don't care anymore. But in fact, we actually see a response in empathy from God. We see that despite the troubles we go through in life, God still has a plan for you. So an example, in my senior year of high school, all right, I decided to go on a little bike ride one night. Yes. Yeah. I go on a bike ride one night, and you know, it's getting late, so I turn back. All right, a truck pulls out and hits me. I break my neck, my forefingers, and nose. All right? Sure. Yeah, Caitlin. And so it's very easy to get in this mindset of, God, why did you do this to me? What have you done to me? I didn't ask for this. I didn't want to, this is my senior year of high school. I don't want to do this. Like, I was having a good year. And it's ruined. Like, why? It's so easy to get that mindset of, God, why are you doing this? Blaming God. Well, instead, but as it progresses, as I'm healing and recovering, I kind of realize, you know what, I can't change this. Nothing's going to change here. I might as well make the best of the situation. And so I seek God for reassurance. God provides the reassurance to Hagar, to me, just as he provided reassurance to Hagar. And now we continue in chapter 21. And so I go to verses 8 through 14. The child grew and was weaned, and on the day Isaac was weaned, Abraham held a great feast. But Sarah saw the son whom Hagar the Egyptian had borne to Abraham was mocking. And she said to Abraham, "Get rid of that slave woman and her son, for that woman's son will never share in my inheritance with my son Isaac." The matter distressed Abraham greatly because it concerned his son. But God said to him, "Do not be so distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. I will make the son of the slave into a nation, also because he is your offspring." Early the next morning, Abraham took some food and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar. He sent them on her shoulders and then sent her off with the boy. She went on her way and wandered in the desert of Beersheba. And so here, Sarah is again mistreating Hagar and says, "You know what? I have my son. I don't need you anymore. Get out of my life. Go." And now we see, as earlier, God provided reassurance to Hagar in this distress. God is now going to provide some reassurance to Abraham. Because now Abraham is kind of distressed. He has this moral conundrum here. Do I listen to my wife or do I save my son? Because even though Isaac is my inheritance, my heir, Ishmael is still my kid, and it's my duty to protect him. And so it's almost the idea that if you're a little kid, your parents tell me, don't hang out with that kid anymore, he's a bad influence. Even if maybe your best friend, your parents tell you, don't hang out with that kid anymore. All right, this moral conundrum here. Do I listen to my parents, all right, and then discipline my best friend by completely getting out of his life? Or do I ignore my parents and face punishment and backlash while protecting my friend? All right, what do we do here? Well, thankfully, God provides an out for Abraham. God provides a solution. And so we see this in verse 12. But God said to him, "Do not be so distressed about the boy and your slave woman. Listen to whatever Sarah tells you, because it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned." So here, as again earlier, God is providing reassurance to Hagar. But now Abraham is the one who needs it most. Abraham is staffed with the difficulties of sending his son out into the desert, alone with barely any food and water. But then God says, "Don't worry, I'll take care of him. Listen to your wife." Again, as your heir is Isaac. That's who your family will live on through. And so we see this moving on in verses 15 and 16. When the water in the skin was gone, she put the boy under one of the bushes. Then she went off and sat down about a bow shot away, for she thought, "I cannot watch the boy die." And as she sat there, she began to sob. So here we see the exact reason why Abram is so distressed. I'm sending my kid out into the desert. And all I'm doing is sending him with just like a water bottle full of water for 2 people and a little bit of food. That's not going to be enough. And so it's no wonder why Abraham was so distressed to begin with. Because he knew that's a very real possibility that they could both die. And so Hagar responds by, "I've gone through so much torment in my life. Sarah has mistreated me, treated like property. I've gone through this and this and this, and it keeps mounting up. The one thing I am not going to deal with, I'm not going to see, is watch my own son die." And so again, we see Hagar put her child under a bush, and she goes a bow shot away, hundreds of yards away. Think, I can't see it, I'm not going to look at it. All right, and so she begins to cry out to the Lord. Cry in misery and plead. And then we see the fulfillment of this in 17 through 19. God heard the boy crying, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven and said to her, "What is the matter, Hagar? Do not be afraid. God has heard the boy crying as he lies there. Lift the boy up and take him by the hand, for I will make him into a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. So she went and filled the skin with water, and she gave the boy a drink. So here we see that God is now coming in with safety, with a plan. Right? I've heard your cries, I've heard your pleas, I've heard your misery. And God comes back, opens her eyes, and sees a well of water. She goes, gets water, she gives water for a kid, and gives herself a drink. Now, some of you may be asking, why is God waiting so long? Why could God just step in and just not let this happen in the first place? The kid and her were dying of dehydration, and you waited till after the fact to step in? Why? You could have just done something earlier, and this would never happen in the first place. But this simply comes to the idea that, again, God is providing not just reassurance and a plan, but teaching. For sometimes it takes suffering to lead you into success. As one of the greatest teachers we have in life is failure. Sometimes God is going to use temporary suffering to lead you into prosperity. Because, frankly, it means more that you get a flat tire on the way to your destination, and you change the tire with no worry, and then get to your destination than just getting there no problem whatsoever. Sometimes you need that flat tire on the way there for God to show you how blessed you are. Last year, I lost a friend, all right? She said, I want nothing to do with you anymore. All right, and as much as I hated that, it was terrible, all right? It took that one moment for God to show you that your whole social life does not depend on one person, right? You have so many other people in your life, so many others. That one person is not going to make or break it. So sometimes you need to go through this suffering, this hardship to lead you into prosperity and success. Because again, sometimes a flat tire means more than just no problems whatsoever. And so we see that even throughout the suffering, God never leaves your side. That you are going to face suffering in your life. So much. The Bible speaks to this so much. All right? Jesus tells his disciples, if you really want to be like me, you're going to suffer like me. All right? We're going to face so much troubles in our life, and we just have to deal with it. But God is going to come in the end and pray for reassurance, a plan, and safety. And so in closing here, I want to wrap up by just going over what we have covered today. All right? And so the first part, we covered the reassurance that God provides Hagar. But also we see the grace that God is providing Abraham and Sarah. That despite what they did, he still provides them with the fulfillment of the covenant. And on the next part, we see the reassurance of Hagar again. Where Hagar is worried, but God provides reassurances. She says, "You are now the God who sees me." And later on in this last part, we see God providing reassurance for Abraham. As again, he has to weigh this moral conundrum. What do I do? All right, because both answers are wrong here. All right, do I leave my kid to die, or do I listen to my wife? No matter what, I'm facing consequences. It just doesn't sit right. But God provides a plan. God provides reassurance to Abraham. Then later on, we see safety. As God shows Hagar a well of water to provide for her dehydrated kid. But we also see providing the plan again, but the providing and teaching. That I'm going to use your suffering as a tool to show you what you need to do, what you actually have, and how I'm going to help you through it. And so there we see God providing in multiple ways. And this connects to the very idea of what this whole series this semester is about. All right, God providing for us. God the provider revealed. Yeah, that's it. The provider revealed. Is he in 16 and 21, we see multiple examples. God is revealing how he provides in multiple ways, numerous ways. And so, in closing, I thank you for your time. Thank you.